In the deep forests of upstate New York, something terrifying was discovered in 1862. Beneath an old, abandoned church, hidden under its floorboards, authorities found 143 unmarked graves. Each skeleton showed signs of long-term torture, broken bones that had healed before death, signs of people nearly drowning over and over, and strange carvings directly on their bones. No one could explain who these people were or how they got there. For over 160 years, government files related to this church, called the Church of the Pure Spirit, were locked away. Only top officials with special permission could access them. But now, previously secret documents have come to light. These files reveal the chilling story of three brothers, Elder Ezra, Deacon Silas, and Prophet Caleb Ravencroft, and how they created one of the darkest religious cults in American history. The story begins in the small town of Ravenwood, located about 40 miles north of Albany. Back in the early 1800s, it was a quiet place with just a few hundred people. Most were farmers, loggers, or traders. The town was founded in 1803 by settlers looking for new land and fresh beginnings. But Ravenwood was also part of a region called the Burned-Over District, an area known for intense religious activity during the Second Great Awakening. It was a time when preachers traveled from town to town, delivering passionate sermons, and new religious groups were forming almost every year. People were questioning old beliefs and searching for new spiritual paths. It was in this setting that the Ravencroft brothers arrived in 1825. Ezra, the oldest, was a commanding man in his 40s. He had deep, intense eyes and a voice that made people listen. Silas, the middle brother, looked more like a scholar. He always carried books, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and wrote pages of religious ideas every day. Caleb, the youngest, was the most mysterious. He spoke in soft whispers that somehow reached every corner of a room. People said his eyes would roll back in his head during what he claimed were visions from God. The brothers were wealthy. They bought a large piece of land outside town and began building their church. It wasn't like other churches. Most churches in that region were simple wooden buildings painted white. But the Ravencroft's church was built from dark stone taken from nearby hills. Its main hall was shaped like an octagon, with 8 smaller rooms surrounding it. The tall steeple stood out against the sky, and the main sanctuary had no windows. The only light came from carefully placed lanterns. At their first public gathering, Elder Ezra spoke to a full crowd. He said, "We have been called by the Spirit to build something new here. In a time of weak faith and false prophets, we bring the truth, purification through suffering." At first, their message didn't seem so strange. Many people in that time believed in discipline and sacrifice, but the Ravencrofts took these ideas much further. They taught that true salvation only came through real, physical suffering. Pain, they said, was necessary to burn away sin. They quoted Bible verses about refining fire and Christ's suffering to support their beliefs. Deacon Silas often explained it this way: "The body is the home of sin. It must be tested and broken so the spirit can rise." Despite these disturbing ideas, their church grew. People from 3 main groups began to join. First, the poor, those who had lost everything and were looking for meaning. Second, the troubled, people who had made serious mistakes in life and wanted redemption. And third, the rich, curious people who had grown bored of normal religion and were seeking something more intense. One of the first members was Margaret Wilkins, a widow who had lost her husband and children to illness. She later wrote in her journal, "Elder Ezra looked at me like he could see my pain. He told me my suffering had meaning. For the first time, I didn't feel empty." By 1827, the church had nearly 100 members. Some built small homes around the church. Others lived in Ravenwood but spent most of their time on church grounds. The brothers asked members to give up their possessions, donate their land and savings, and devote themselves completely. They said earthly things were chains holding people back from spiritual growth. Those who were most devoted were chosen for something special. They became vessels of the Spirit. This meant they had to go through advanced purification. Early rituals included fasting, staying awake all night for prayer, and being dunked in freezing water to drown the sinful self. These practices were painful, but they were only the beginning. The Ravencrofts slowly increased the intensity of these rituals. Like a frog in warming water, the followers didn't realize how bad things were becoming. By 1829, the brothers began building tunnels and chambers beneath the church. These underground rooms would become places of silence, darkness, and torment. That year, Prophet Caleb reportedly told his brothers, "The sheep are gathered, now begins the work of the shepherd." But their idea of a shepherd wasn't someone who protects, it was someone who sacrifices. The turning point came on December 21st, 1829, the winter solstice, the longest night of the year. It was the date of what the Ravencrofts called the First Ascension. That morning, Elder Ezra announced that Caleb had received a powerful vision. All members were to gather in the sanctuary for a special revelation. As night fell and snow began to fall, about 150 followers filled the cold, dark church. The only light came from 12 large candles, arranged in a spiral carved into the floor, all pointing toward a raised platform in the center. Thomas Hartford, a blacksmith who had joined the church after his wife's death, would later escape and testify about what happened that night. He described Ezra speaking louder and more intensely than ever before. Ezra told them that their earlier rituals had only prepared them. Now they were ready for the true cleansing. He said they had been patient shepherds guiding gently, but now it was time for the Spirit to rise through sacrifice. What followed that night has never been fully revealed, but Hartford and a few others managed to flee. What they described was horrifying. People being chained, beaten, submerged in icy water, branded, or worse. Many never came out of that sanctuary again. Over the next several years, the church isolated itself even more. Outsiders who asked questions were turned away or frightened into silence. Rumors spread, but no one dared interfere until 1862 when a fire broke out in the abandoned church. Firefighters discovered the floorboards had collapsed into the earth, revealing the terrible truth. Hundreds of bones, hidden for decades. And so ended the Ravencroft Church. But their dark legacy lives on. The government buried the case in secrecy. The town of Ravenwood slowly faded into history, and the name Ravencroft became something whispered only in fear.